Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. Today's show is going to be a very interesting show, so please try and hang in there with us. The name of the show is The Odds of Guilt versus Innocence on Richard Allen, based on the jury and the jury's findings. At this time, I want to introduce Debbie Rollison. Do I have that right?
That's right.
And Debbie from True Crime, Deb's True Crime Notebook. Yeah, Debbie from Deb's True Crime Notebook is here today. I've been an admirer of her work for a number of years. She's really good, really to the point, extremely factual, and extremely educational. So we're lucky to have her here today, and I'm honored. Welcome, Debbie.
Hello, how are you?
Good, very good. Thank you. Thank you. We're doing very well. Now, also, too, the other thing that I want to bring out is that we want to send our deepest condolences out to Libby and Abby's family and friends. Hopefully, they've gotten some justice here. I won't use the closure word. I have a real problem with that. I've worked with many families, and there really is not closure when you lose a loved one like this,
Mm.
especially two little girls in the beginning of their lives. It's very overwhelming, and that very heartfelt, and that leaves a bit of a hole in your heart perpetually forever for the friends and loved ones of Libby and Abby. So God bless them all. And again, our deepest condolences, and hopefully they've gotten some justice, and hopefully the Delphi community has gotten some relief and a sense of justice here, because that dark cloud of having a child predator, child killer in our community, hanging over that community. Will he
Mhm.
be innocent? Will he be found innocent? Will he be found guilty? I mean, extremely traumatic and
Absolutely.
stressful. So, hello to everybody, and welcome once again. Deb, what do you have to say? What do you think here?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. You
Sure.
know that you have been a hero of mine for a long time, and it's wonderful to
Thank
be
you,
here.
thank you.
You're welcome. It's wonderful to be here and share the screen with you. I consider it a privilege. So,
Well,
I've
we're
learned a
honored.
lot from you. Yeah.
Well, thank
So,
you.
yeah,
Thank
I
you.
agree with you that it's been difficult for the families, especially because along with losing a precious member of their family, they have had the view of suspicion placed on them, including Libby's 16-year-old sister at the time, who was totally innocent. Uh,
Kelsey.
yeah, Kelsey, and it's just been difficult, and they have handled it, in my opinion, with a lot of grace. During the court trial recently, their family came and fed the people who were staying in line all night to get into the courthouse. They brought, I think it was pumpkin bread one time, they brought chili another time. They just really, and despite the fact that some of those people had falsely accused them, they were gracious and loving to them, and real impressed with that. And then I think also the town, absolutely. I was there Wednesday of this week, and I can tell you there's a feeling of that cloud has lifted. Before there were pictures of Bridge Guy and things written on the store windows, uh, looking for help in the case, and now all those things are gone, and there's just a feeling, a lighter feeling there, and I think that they can move ahead now. Like you said, there's no ever bringing them back or feeling like it's complete, but it's a time now that they can move ahead.
And heal. Yeah. And
Yeah.
start to heal, start to lower the anxiety. I mean, I really believe that the families are really class people. I mean,
Mhm.
they've got a lot of class. They're very graceful. Um,
Yeah.
There's no question about it because we've watched this for over 4 years and we've been in and out. But altogether, I don't know. Leah would know probably 60, over 60 videos, just,
Mhm.
on Delphi, different people of interest popping up.
Right.
I mean, you take a
Yeah.
look at these people of interest, right? I mean, in this
Right.
little town. I
Yeah.
mean, this is, which, it's pretty incredible, pretty incredible. And pretty much that leads me to what I want to talk about today. What are the odds? Like if you're going to go and you're going to play the lottery and everything, and it can be, scratch off lotteries, or we can even talk about Powerball, Mega Millions. I mean, we can talk about
Mhm.
various lotteries. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds you're going to win? And when I look at Richard Allen, because I look at a lot of percentages,
Mhm.
when we're involved in a case, what are the percentages of innocence versus guilt? Who do we eliminate? Who do we call a person of interest until we eliminate them? And we always go out to eliminate, because if we get on the right person, we won't be able to eliminate them.
Mhm.
And the case against him will only get better and better. And that's what we try to do here, looking at these various people of interest. And boy, I call them the usual suspects, but I'll tell you what, in Delphi, we have had a cast of people of interest, some characters all around
Absolutely.
pop
Yeah.
up, right? But the one thing is, what are the odds that Richard Allen was on that trail that
Mhm.
day at that time when these two girls, when Libby and Abby were abducted? I mean, what are the odds of a person being there and having that happen? Then you ask yourself, okay, well, he could have been there and it could have been going on, but then what are the odds of looking similar to Bridge Guy?
Yeah.
What are the odds of having very similar dress as Bridge Guy? All right. And we have to take
Right.
that into consideration. What are the odds that, along with being there looking like having similar dress, what are the odds that he has a gun that's the same caliber that matches an unspent round that is found between the bodies of Libby and Abby? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just trying, to get the audience to try to understand this, okay, and the way we would approach this and take a look at this. All right.
Mhm.
There's lots of people say, well, there are no coincidences. Well, sometimes there are coincidences. Coincidences exist because that's why you have the word coincidence, right? So, I mean, it
Yeah.
does happen. But when you have 4 or 5 or 6 coincidences in a row, whoa, I mean,
Mhm.
something smells here, right? Something isn't too well. Then we have the round that is the same round that matches his pistol. It seems to have the markings of a round that was ejected from his
Mhm.
pistol. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
And some people are saying, oh, well, that's not science, or it's junk science or whatever. Well, obviously it's not, because they let it into pretty much any court, uh, or the majority of courts, whereas you can't get a lie detector test into court. Excuse me,
Yeah.
that's not acceptable, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
what are the odds here that are piling up on these? What's the percentages towards guilt here so far, right? Then we have a sergeant, I believe he was a sergeant with the state police that was listening to the recordings. Is that true?
Which one was it? Who's the
This was a sergeant that testified, if he
Oh,
was a sergeant.
Brian Harshman that was listening to his
Yeah,
recording.
was he a sergeant though? I don't want to.
I believe Brian is a
Mhm.
sergeant, yeah, or was at the time.
So then you have the sergeant who's listened to hundreds of hours of
Mm.
recordings
Yeah,
of Richard
700,
Allen,
over 700 hours.
700 hours.
Yeah.
What are the odds of him coming back and saying that's Richard Allen's voice?
Mm.
All right, you see how this is all adding up, okay? Percentage wise, folks, I'm not an expert in math, so you might have to consult a mathematician or doctor of physics or something, but that's certainly not me. But
Yeah,
I
there's a
am pretty much a master of common sense.
yeah.
I'll tell you that much.
Okay. There's
And
a few other things that I can add to that.
go, please.
If you'd
That's
like.
why I wanted you on. I know you know
Right.
everything. You covered this case from top to bottom. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what are the odds that there would be four young girls on the trail that passed him and described him exactly what he had been wearing that day? And then what are the odds that he in turn described them and said two of them looked like they might be sisters and one of them looked like they might be babysitting the other one, which was facts, which actually was true. Two of them were sisters. They were babysitting the smaller one. He only saw three of the girls, but there was a fourth. She was smaller, and kind of on the other side when they passed. And what are the odds of that? What were the odds that Betsy Blair would be doing her daily walk and come up the bridge and see him standing on the bridge looking down and describe him in the same clothing? And then when she saw both of these, the group of girls and Betsy Blair, when they saw the video of Libby's, they said, that is the man we saw that day. So, what are the odds of that? What are the odds that Sarah Carball would be driving down 300 North, which I have a video of that particular drive on my channel? What are the odds that Sarah Carball would see a man covered in mud and blood walking along the road and describe him as wearing the same type of clothing? Now, first on, she described him as maybe having a tan jacket, but later on, when they questioned her, she said, well, he was so covered in mud that was all I remembered was the brown, but otherwise described him totally. So, what are the odds of all of that? And what are the
Right.
odds that a man like that would tell his own mother, I did it, I absolutely did it, over and over and over on a phone, or his wife? So, those are
Yeah,
additional things.
absolutely. The admissions. I mean, just incredible. Now, are you finished with that piece?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Because when we get into that, then they start talking about the psychosis
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. Well, the bottom line is that I have worked and supervised the unit, which was half addiction, half psych, and I have seen people in the midst of a psychotic break, and I've seen them get shot up with Haldol. Haldol was used as a
Mm-hmm.
medication that's the medication of choice to bring
Right.
somebody around. But I have never ever seen or heard of anywhere in all my years doing this that has admitted that many times
Mm-hmm.
to murdering somebody. Now, I know there are people that have had breaks, psychotic breaks, who have hallucinated and said
Mm-hmm.
they killed somebody. But when
Mm-hmm.
they came out of it, of course, it was the pure psychosis. The person was not dead.
Right.
This man is coming out of a psychosis, and we can call it hallucinations, if you will, or the defense is calling it hallucinations. And when he comes out of his psychosis, these girls are dead.
Right.
So, you know, um, and there's only things that the killer would have known. But hallucinations take place certainly with psychosis, but this is a new one for me. And I mean, I've worked emergency rooms, worked the unit for 4 years. I mean, and then all the interaction here with mayhem and murder with our organization stock system,
Mhm.
to identify, apprehend, I'm sorry, stock system to apprehend lethal killers incorporated. I mean, you have to understand that this is the first one for me hearing that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Another thing that's a first one for me is seeing a person get arrested and he needs some financial assistance. He needs an attorney.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he writes a letter to the judge. Now he's incarcerated at this point in time.
Right.
And he sends a letter to the judge and, says to the judge that, he needs, legal representation.
Mhm.
Well, that's fine and dandy. And that they have no money, they can't afford it. It's too expensive to hire an attorney. He didn't realize it was that expensive to hire an attorney. But nowhere in that letter does he expound on why me? Would you arrest me for I never killed anybody?
Exactly.
I never killed anybody. If they came to my house and drugged me out of my house or arrested me anywhere and charged me with killing two little girls,
Mhm.
my God, I'm going to have a shit fit. Sorry for, if it disturbs anybody, but I'm going to go off.
Right.
Okay. And I'm going to put that in the letter. Please help me with a lawyer. I'm facing these murder charges. I didn't kill these two girls. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison in Indiana. It still has a death penalty. And I mean, come on, that's pretty,
Yeah,
stuff that can make somebody pretty anxious.
I
Okay.
agree. I
So I
agree,
don't,
absolutely.
I mean, I think what are the odds of not writing in the letter that you're innocent of these
Mhm.
murders?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Go
there
ahead,
are
please,
yeah,
please go ahead, please.
you're just bringing so many thoughts to my mind. When you're talking about his situation with psychosis, if you want to remove all of there were over 61 times that he confessed. That
Right,
there were a lot more than that, but those are the ones that they said were worded validly, etc. So if you want to look at those that happened or occurred during the time of his psychosis, which was the peak of his psychosis, according to the psychologist or psychiatrist, was April 13th, 2023. So if you want to look, there were many, many confessions after that. Uh, After that time, in May of the 2nd of May, Dr. Martin, who happened to be the psychiatrist who came to see him, and he actually is the one that prescribed and administered Haldol. Dr. Walla is a psychologist, so she
right.
does not prescribe medication, nor would she be administering it. Some people I've heard on YouTube have that wrong, but he said at that point on May 2nd, he exhibited no further signs of psychosis. The next day, on May 3rd, is when he confesses to Dr. Walla very calmly, very rationally, that he left his mother's home. He had been visiting his mom in Peru. He left which I think might be a trigger. We'll get to that. He left his mom's house in Peru and went and bought a 6-pack of beer. More likely it was probably a 12-pack, but we'll go with 6-pack. He drank 3 of those beers and he went to the trails and he saw the girls and he directed them down the hill. And he said he didn't intend to harm them. He intended to molest them. So you were always correct. It was a sexually motivated crime. But when Brad Weber came home on that private drive and he saw the van coming, it startled him and he marched those girls across the creek. And that's when he decided to end their lives. So there were many confessions. On May 10th, he told his wife, Kathy, that he said, "Do you still love me?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "I did it. I didn't do everything that I said I did, but I did kill the girls." So, there have been various before and after times that he confessed before he actually experienced the psychosis period of time. So, if you want to, even as a viewer or someone who's listening to this, um, subtract those out during the time he had psychosis, you still have confessions, valid confessions that only with information in them that only the killer would know. My husband is a psychologist, a doctor of psychology. He's dealt with children who are high risk, who have had crimes perpetrated on them, and who have in fact perpetrated crimes on others. And one of the things that he said, and I think that you've said it too, is that he might falsely confess in psychosis, but not with actual facts that are provable in the crime.
Right, the hallucinations or whatever. I mean, that
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
they can come from different places. I mean, in the mind. I mean, so I happen to agree with your husband. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no question about it. And when you look at um, this whole thing of down the hill and getting them to where he wanted to get them.
Hmm.
And then he said, I think you mentioned to his mother, to his wife, to somebody that he killed them. And a lot of people, I think, from my world, are under a misunderstanding that there was no SA. Okay. Well, there may not have been any physical, up close and personal SA, but
Hmm.
if you are in some way making a young girl disrobe
Hmm.
physically, or because you literally have a gun pointed to their head or something, that is SA. Okay.
Yeah.
That's abuse. And I don't, you know, so I don't want to hear anything that these
Hmm.
girls, that weren't abused, because this, as you said earlier on, and we said it, we picked it up a long time ago. This has got to be about sex. It's got to be about sex.
Yeah.
It was. He even turns around and says he's addicted to sex.
Hmm.
Now then you wonder how much manipulation takes place, because my rule of thumb with violent, sexual killers that are predators of women and children is that, and I've interviewed a number of serial killers, is when their lips are moving, they're lying. Okay. Extremely manipulative people.
Right.
Okay. Extremely manipulative people. So, a possible scenario that I would throw out there, and it's only a possible scenario, is, and it's all mine, it's possible, but I'm not saying it happened. You know, the defense starts talking to him, and he learns that if he's having some kind of break or whatever from the so-called solitary confinement. I mean, I've seen people in the hall. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I know what real solitary is,
Yeah.
deep in a prison.
Right.
Okay, and it's a
Right.
mattress on a cold. It used to be. I don't know today, but it used to be a mattress on a cold
Hmm.
slab floor, and good luck to you. We'll call you in a week for a shower or something. I mean, that was really rough and ragged and everything else. But when we're talking about the situation where we have, um, him in this kind of solitary situation, I mean, what we're looking at is really he had a pad. I never knew of anybody who went to solitary with a pad.
Hmm.
I would call this more protective custody, because they were
It
scared he
is.
was. a danger to himself, or could be hurt by others. But really, to me, it sounded like Suicide Watch, where
It
they
was.
just had the camera on him, and
You're
they were
correct.
watching all the way with that.
Right.
And so, I mean, I have a real problem with that. I have a real, I have a real problem that he had this kind of break and was able to spew all this information that only the killer would know,
Hmm.
these facts. And, again, um, I think he got it in his head that, if he could manipulate somehow, that would help him.
Hmm.
And don't forget, he was given um, a diagnosis, I guess, a while ago of dependent personality disorder. Where did that come from?
That came from Dr. Walla, but I don't buy it, and my husband doesn't buy it.
Okay.
And I tell you, some of the things during the hearing that were a telltale sign that he did not suffer from dependency disorder is that when he was in the questioning room with Holman, and that was the day that he was arrested, and his wife was in there with him. She said, Holman left the room and she said to him, and they were still filming, this was all recorded and shown in the courtroom. He said, she said, "You didn't tell me you were on the bridge. You told me you went to the trails that day. Why didn't you tell me you were on the bridge?"
What
And
are the
he,
odds? What are the
yeah,
odds? Go ahead,
what are
Deb.
the
I'm
odds?
sorry. I'm
What
sorry.
are the odds that he wouldn't have told her that? And so she said, she said this to him, and he said, oh, he was very manipulative at that point. He started saying, "Baby, you know that's not true. You know me, you know." And he just kept on and on in a very manipulative way. That is not, to me, the personality of someone who had a dependency disorder. And when I told my husband that Dr. Walla had diagnosed him with that, he just shook his head and said, "There's no way. That's not the personality of somebody who's dependent upon someone else to tell them what to do at all times." And the fact that he, had been in the military, he had worked as a shift manager, and he did have a pharmacy tech license. He had leadership ability, obviously. I do not believe that that diagnosis was factual. I think
Yeah,
it
I,
was
I, I
maybe.
have a bit of a, I have a bit of a problem with that. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Oh, I was going to say, I think that maybe he was a little manipulative with Dr. Walla
Oh,
and playing the innocent, and, yeah.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that, to me, it looks like, he said, and spewed out these admissions, and then he kind of contradicted them by behavior and other
Hmm.
false admissions. Like, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, is that what, um, he wanted to just come clean in
Hmm.
the beginning, and because guilt can cause depression too.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And guilt can cause a major depression that can end up in a break, right? A
Hmm.
psychotic break.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm wondering if he just want to get it off his chest and get it out there, and school's
Hmm.
out, and then, I was kind of grabbed by, this kind of telling his wife and his mother maybe what they wanted to hear or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, see, that's where, I kind of looked at that dependent personality. Thought to myself, well, you know what? They they don't want him to be guilty.
Of
Shut up,
course.
honey. You don't shut up, honey. You don't know what you're saying, or they kept hanging up on him, or you don't
Hmm.
know. It's not you. You didn't do it. And this whole thing went on.
Yeah.
But again, you got to ask yourself, what are the odds of some guy that goes for a walk on the trail to go down to the bridge and look at the fish that are 60 or 70 feet down in February, even if it's a very nice day.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the nicest days in Indiana recent history,
In January.
In February, right?
Right. Right.
And he's all bundled up, the way he was dressed, and he wants to look at the fish. And what are the odds that this guy ends up, with all these different things happening and coincidences
Mm-hmm.
that lead him into court for murdering two children?
Right.
And, he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So
Absolutely.
I think people need to really take it piece by piece by piece by piece and put them maybe just kind of in his shoes or near his shoes. How does all this bad luck? What are the odds of all this bad luck happening to this guy who's gone for a walk, as he's done other times,
Right.
on that trail? And and then afterwards, I mean, I didn't hear anybody coming up that saw him at the gas station or the
Mm-hmm.
supermarket or the convenience store down the road or anything. I mean,
Right.
I haven't heard that the fence used anything like that
And
in
I
an
think
alibi.
there's another what are the odds, and that is Betsy Blair passed Betsy Blair saw him on the bridge, okay? So he was clearly there around the time that bridge guy would have been there, if he's not bridge guy. Because when Betsy Blair turned around to leave, she passed Libby and Abby, and they were on their way to the bridge. So if he's not bridge guy, why didn't he see bridge guy? Because he has,
Excellent point. First time I've really heard that. Excellent point, Deb.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
what are
think
the
there's,
odds? What are the odds?
yeah, so many. I know, right? At some point,
Uh,
you have to wonder why people don't get this, why they're not getting it. Oh,
Well, I think there's a couple of things hanging out. And I think what people have to understand is, first, a lot of people don't believe, um, that a man that does not have a record,
mm-hmm.
okay, could do such a thing.
Yeah,
Well, first of all, we don't know if he has a record that is out there he's never been in the criminal justice system. What I mean by that is he never got caught. If he
mm-hmm.
did stuff earlier and never got caught, he wouldn't have a record. Personally,
Exactly.
I'd like to really follow up on him and see everywhere he's been. I
Yeah,
mean, not that he's been found guilty. I mean, he's
right.
innocent until proven guilty. Now he's proven guilty. I'd like to look into that and see where that goes. And I would like the audience to also understand that Ted Bundy never had a record either
Oh, wow.
until he killed
Yeah,
somebody.
good
Okay.
point.
And we have a fellow right now. He's innocent until proven guilty. He'll be going to trial. No, no, not too far distant future. Rex Heuermann, the Long
Yeah,
Island serial killer. I don't know how many bodies he might have out there. Might. Again,
right.
he's innocent until proven guilty. But he has no record. He was a
Mhm.
well-to-do businessman who had a business in downtown Manhattan,
And a family man. Yeah.
and a family man. Okay, so just because somebody doesn't have a record doesn't mean that they didn't do it. It doesn't mean they haven't done things in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but it could mean that they did do it after coming through a court and being found guilty when there's
Right.
when there's certain evidence that can point to them. Now, with that being said, I also want to mention that if there is a lack of evidence, you know, um, that has nothing to do with guilt. I mean, because no DNA, nobody came up with any DNA or whatever. I mean, we always love to hear DNA, but you know, a lack of evidence doesn't mean the person didn't do it.
Right. There was a lack of,
Fingerprints or DNA. I mean, if
yeah.
that doesn't mean that means they handled it in a smart way. Maybe they wore gloves. Okay. Maybe they did not get close enough. Maybe they did not get up and close personally,
Mhm.
sexually.
Right.
Okay. Um, I'm looking at him at this point in time, and I'm looking at a fantasy. Not sure what that fantasy is more. We when we nail it down a little bit better, we'll be getting back out on a fantasy because a lot of these guys are fantasy killers
Right.
and they're
You know, my
acting like fantasy.
Yeah, my husband and I have talked about this, and he believes that that's the case. He believes that Richard Allen suffered from compulsions to, act on it, and the compulsions were growing stronger and stronger. His wife had been away for a while because she was helping. I can't remember. I think it was her mother who had maybe been ill at that time. He, had compulsions that drove him. I think he had this fantasy and he stopped to get beer to try to, put it out of his mind or something. But what happened is it actually took away a lot of the inhibitions that he had. And then he, on that day, acted on his compulsions. And I don't feel like Libby and Abby were someone he knew or had heard about um, before. I think that they just happened to be, unfortunately, the two people that crossed that bridge that day, and he realized that they're trapped at the end of that bridge. They can't get away from me. And I think that's why it happened to them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the way it looks. Um, some of the people on our team believe that somehow too he was tracking them, knowing
Mm.
something about them. Of course, there was a lot of talk about him having some connection to Keegan Klein. I mean, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think about this that's out there that Keegan Klein called and actually talked to Libby on that day? Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
behind that? Is there any proof behind that?
I can't figure out if that was actually law enforcement just telling him that during questioning to try to get him to confess, or if that actually happened. Um, I definitely think we know that she was communicating with that Anthony Schatz account, which Kagan Klein had control of. And I think it's just a weird coincidence. If not, we're going to find out, I think, in the future. And there's still a part of me that is open to thinking that could possibly be, because it is such a strange coincidence. And he was involved in, all the CSAM and luring girls to send pictures, although he didn't seem to ever act upon anything. Um, there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah, he didn't kill anybody, that
Mhm.
we know of, and I'm not sure if he. Well, I think maybe once he tried to get up close and personal with somebody that I heard of, but he was pretty
Mhm.
much just catfishing girls, and he was getting
Right.
his juice from getting them and manipulating and getting off, having power and control over them to get them to send him naked pictures of themselves.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that was his juice.
Yeah. And I don't think that, this is my own personal opinion. I'm going on it based on logic and human behavior, which I like to study a lot. And I don't think that he ever got a hold of pictures from Libby or Abby, because he said that he blocked them because they were annoying. Now, if you were a man catfishing a girl and they were sending you pictures, you would not block them. You wouldn't want to block them. You were getting what you wanted from them. So I don't believe the
Absolutely.
little girls ever did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that for 1 minute. Also the other thing that we have going on, and I to anybody in the audience that believes there was a miscarriage of justice here in some way by Judge Gull or whatever. I mean, you
Yeah.
hear this all the time, I'm sure, up there,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the bottom line for me is that that's why there are appeals courts.
Right.
Okay, that let the appeals process take place here. If you
Mhm.
feel it was a miscarriage of justice, that's what it's for. Let's not
Right.
go crazy now. Let's not start fighting. Let's not insulting people. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, I just don't see how it
Yeah.
serves a good purpose. I mean, just follow the appeal process and see what happens. Now,
Right.
again, we have to take into consideration too, this was a horrific murder
Mm.
done in the middle of the afternoon,
Yes.
daylight. Okay. This was a sexual motive, as far as we're concerned.
Mhm.
This was a horrendous, I'll call it sharp instrument attack. All right.
Mhm.
I won't say knife attack. And when has Delphi ever seen anything like this before? Okay. And
Exactly.
we've worked with law enforcement around the country, and they're much bigger communities, cities, much larger law enforcement teams,
Mhm.
with many detectives. Okay. And I think people have to understand that this is a crime that Delphi has never seen
Mm.
before. Okay, so
Right.
so did Ellie make some mistakes?
Yes.
Probably. Pro- Bottom line is that this isn't New York City's special victims unit. They're
Yeah.
the Delphi police, okay, and even the state police are not used to this type of crime.
Mhm.
But just in general, this is not an easy crime to wrap around, to get wrapped around. I mean, this
Yeah.
is serious stuff here. Okay,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of people need to understand that in just about every case that takes place all over, there are mistakes made. Things
Right.
get lost. I've got one right now with evidence being lost. I mean, things get lost, things
Mhm.
are deleted, things are misfiled, which we have here, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Right.
thanks God that they found they had it misplaced. They found
Right.
the interview that he
Right.
did with the was that an environmental forest officer or something like that?
It was, yeah. His name was Dan Doolin, and he was a
Right.
conservation officer. A lot of people, I didn't realize at the point that conservation officers have all of the same authority that a regular law enforcement officer would. So he filled that information out and turned it in from the confession or the information that Richard Allen gave. And Richard Allen lived on Whiteman Drive, and he mistakenly, or whoever filed that information mistakenly wrote it as Richard Allen Whiteman.
Ah,
Yeah. So Allen is a common middle name. I think that's why that happened. And so it was
okay.
misfiled. And then there was a uh, lovely lady, Kathy Schenk, and she was a former child advocacy person. My husband knew of her, and she volunteered to help them in that office and to file things and put things into the computer. And she found a file box that she started going through and came upon it. And that's how they found the tip.
What are the odds? I mean, that's a miracle,
It is. I was just thinking the
right? I
same
mean,
thing.
seriously, look
Yeah.
at it, right?
A gift from God, right? Yeah.
I'm telling you that she found that there,
Yeah.
and when he gave that interview, I just don't have that information. I don't know why I don't have it here.
Hmm.
How many days was that after the murder that he gave that interview to that officer?
I think it was just a couple of days off the top of my head. I don't remember the exact date, but it was a couple of days. And I think it was because he passed those girls on the trail and he knew that they could identify him having passed them. And I think that's why he thought I'd better come forward and give a reason why I was there. And that, yeah, I saw the girls too, but I didn't go to the bridge, or I did go to the bridge and looked at fish, I think is what he said. So I think that was his motive, is to get ahead of it. And
Absolutely.
I think he probably was like, oh no, when he saw the video of Libby come out with him.
Yeah, this man is not a stupid man. I mean, he was a manager on certain shifts at Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They, to hire you as a manager,
Mm-hmm.
you have to believe you have
Yeah.
something on the ball, right? I
Right.
mean,
Leadership ability, right? Not a
uh,
dependency situation.
right, leadership. Well, and keep in mind, he went through the same training I went through in the Army, in the
Mm-hmm.
National Guard, advanced infantry training, where you learn hand-to-hand combat. You learn how to use a knife in
Mm-hmm.
hand-to-hand combat. I mean, if in fact that's true that he did go through infantry training,
Yeah.
okay, um, he would have learned that stuff. And it seems he rose. He was in there like 10 years, as what's alleged, and he rose to the rank of sergeant.
Right.
Right. So he would
Mm-hmm.
have leadership capabilities and would know how
Mm-hmm.
to march people and kind of keep them in line. Right.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
that's really interesting too. Maybe we're gonna have to hire your husband here or something too. He seems to be nailing it pretty good here, right?
He's a pretty smart guy. He's been doing this for about 40 years. So,
Well,
uh,
that's experience. You can't beat experience. Let me tell you. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
yeah. One of the things too with Dan Doolin, the conservation officer, once Dan realized that Kathy Shank had found this and he was presented with that information and they started questioning him, asking him about that day, he then looked up in his records Richard Allen, and what he found is kind of interesting, that he had applied for a new fishing license as soon after the deaths of the girls, and he changed his height from 5'4" to 5'6". So, with if you think about, people say, well, one of the girls who identified him, I believe it was Rayleigh, that she said he was her height, and she was about 5'7". So if he truly is 5'4", which I believe he is, I saw him in court and he's about my height. I'm 5'3.5". And so I think that with an army boot on, which he said he was wearing that day, provides about 2 inches. And then he had a hat on and a hoodie over it, which provides another couple of inches. So he would have been around 5'7", 5'8" to her visually. So those were the things that Dan Doolin looked up, and he thought that was interesting that he had attempted to change his height.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, you get back to what are the odds that he's all dressed up like that on one of the nicest days? You know, for what reason?
Mm-hmm.
He's extremely an outdoors kind of guy. He's walked the trails a lot. He's done skydiving, I believe. I mean, this guy, he's got some sauce to him there. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Something else that comes out a lot too is it seems there are a number of people out there that feel law enforcement just wanted to solve this case for whatever reason, political or whatever. There's all kinds of rumors out there.
Mm-hmm.
So they just landed on poor Richard Allen, the clerk behind the counter at the
Mm-hmm.
CVS store, who was pretty nice to everybody. And with that being said, I must say that for those that don't know, Ted Bundy worked on the suicide hotline and
Wow.
saved a couple of people's lives that were going to commit suicide, talked them out of it. Okay. I mean, there's a great book out there. God bless her, Anne Rule. She passed away. She wrote the book, The Stranger Beside Me.
Mm.
And, uh, it was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And people do have personalities like Dr. Jekyll and
Yeah.
Mr. Hyde. It can happen. Somebody can flip, the switch and all of a sudden become a completely different person. And
Right.
and getting back to that, just jumping on the poor sap, if you will, Richard Allen, who was just a guy working behind the counter at CVS. There has been so many people of interest over the years that have come across law enforcement's screen.
Hmm.
We've all seen them. You and I could start trying to name them all. We'd forget some of them. There's so many
So many.
that really had some meat on their
Exactly.
bones. I mean, these were people. Some of these people, you know, could have been involved. Okay,
Right.
and so we call them the usual suspects. In this case, there were a lot of people of interest, a lot of usual suspects with some history
Hmm.
that law enforcement really could have come down on, right?
Right.
And had used that history to
Hmm.
convict them.
Right.
Why not? Why,
Exactly.
why didn't they? Why did they go after the unassuming man behind the counter at CVS who was a technician helping
Hmm.
out in the store? And there's one simple reason: they followed the evidence that we just brought up in this show.
Right.
They
Right.
followed the evidence. There may not be fingerprints, there may not be DNA, but
Hmm.
there's other evidence.
Right.
And I'll tell you, the jury believed it. Believed the evidence they saw, and there's a lot of interaction out there from people that really believe in an appeal, and I too believe in the appeal process. I do
Hmm.
believe it.
Hmm.
Okay, and should he win an appeal, that does not mean that he is not the killer. Okay, at this
Right.
point, if he wins an appeal, they'll probably try the case again.
Yeah.
He'll probably get an appeal for a new trial if, in fact, he
Hmm.
gets. I don't think it'll be easy for him to get one.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
in fact he does get one, but I got to tell you, it's a situation where I truly believe law enforcement got their guy, and that is just my opinion. And folks, it's only my opinion, our team's opinion, Deb's opinion as well. But that's just the way we feel. And you guys are entitled to your opinion. But let's be nice about it. Let's not get
Yeah.
gross over it. Let's not get disrespectful. Let's not start throwing slanderous slurs out there because really no good comes from that. Really, really,
Absolutely. I
you know.
agree wholeheartedly. You know, the fact that law enforcement kept everything so close to the vest and so quiet, that caused people to really dig in, and um, they just wanted to fill in the gaps. And so they start doing that with their own theories, which is, that's what we do. We try to come up with why it happened and who could have been involved. And I think you're right. If they just wanted to pin it on somebody, um, the logical person would have been Ron Logan because he lived right there. The girls were found on his property. He asked for a false alibi from his relative that day, which we know he did because he was driving and drinking, not supposed to be driving. So it makes sense. But that would have been the perfect person to pin it on. It doesn't make sense that they would just pick someone like out of the clear blue. Um, and there's not, there's so many conspiracy theories floating around. You do realize what are the odds if it was a conspiracy? Yeah, you know, if it was a conspiracy, it would have to include um, the prosecutor, it would have to include the local police, the county police, the state police. They had a task force they formed of police officers from around the state. It would have had to include them, the FBI, the judge, the jury. I mean, how at some point we've got to think logically. And I hope that people can do that and just sit back, like you said, stay calm, let everything take its course. They're going to file for an appeal. They will file for an appeal for many different reasons. They'll keep doing it. And I think that the prosecutor is getting prepared for that. Yesterday, he sent out a precipice requesting the actual testimony from the ballistics expert for the defense side, which is Eric Warren. And they want to go over his information and what he talked about for the ballistics testing. And I think the other thing they probably need to do is to strengthen that testing. One of the things in listening to experts that I've listened to and read about that they say should probably happen is that what was maybe missing, the reason that Oberg, who is the prosecutor's expert, could not get the striation marks by just simply cycling the slide on the gun, was that she may have left out the force in which Richard Allen used when he cycled that gun and the speed in which he used. So by putting that in some kind of machinery and starting at different varying speeds and force and energy until they achieve those striation marks that way, I think that would be a better way to test it according to the things that I've studied, but what do I know? But I also found it interesting that the defense's expert only looked at her notes and her pictures. He did not conduct his own experiment. He wasn't asked to by the defense. And never once did he say that the prosecution's expert, Melissa Oberg, that she was incorrect in her findings. He never said that. He just said he would have done it in a different way. So I think that's something that why Nick is probably pulling that testimony to study it, to get ready in case there is an appeal. If there is, it'll be on some kind of technicality.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, that you're right. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, just because there's a technicality doesn't mean he didn't commit the crime. Just
exactly.
because there's an absence of evidence, physical evidence, doesn't mean he didn't commit the crime.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, the other part of it too is that, you know, you go back, you look at the letter, you look at, where he never said he was innocent. You look at all these other coincidences. I mean, how much bad luck could somebody have, right? What are the odds of
Right.
it all coming together? I
Right.
mean, so I think more will
Exactly.
be revealed, and we'll see where the courts go with this. But I give a lot of credit to the families, the people at
Hmm.
Delphi, to Judge Gull, to law enforcement, even though it was frustrating, they wouldn't let any information out. I mean, they had that so tightened up, and
Yeah.
we put up a tip line for people that didn't want to talk to the cops, and we sent over a lot of tips. Um, we took care of that, and we were privy to information too from people wanting to talk to us because they were scared. People were scared.
Mhm. Yeah. Right.
Okay. And they this now, don't forget, we don't go into this for a year and a half. This was going on for a year and a half because I didn't believe we had any business in this case because this guy would be scooped up in a couple of days.
Right. Yeah.
A year and a half later, I hear, can you guys help us out here? There's some people from the town because that contacted us. And that's how we got involved because we just couldn't believe, that this guy wasn't scooped up, you
Hmm.
know, but
Yeah.
that's how things go. That's how things roll. And I just, would like everybody to take a look at what evidence they have, what evidence they've reported, and what specific evidence they do not have, specific evidence they do not have
Hmm.
that shows him, somewhere else or not there or, whatever. because the bottom line is that there was enough evidence to convict him.
Yeah.
And that jury deliberated for a decent amount of time. I mean,
Yes,
I've
they.
seen guilty pleas, or not guilty pleas, but the juries come back with a guilty verdict, in 6 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And that
12 hours.
was a very involved jury. I watched them very closely when I was in the courtroom, and they were taking copious notes. They were zoomed in. They would listen. They would look at facial expressions of Richard Allen. They were very in tune with what was going on. And something unique that I did not know Indiana allowed is that the jury was allowed to ask questions, and their questions were written on paper and handed to the judge. The judge would go behind a screen with both attorneys, and a white noise would come on, like a shushing sound, and to kind of hide their voices. And they would
Wow, that's
discuss.
interesting.
It was really neat. They discussed the questions, and then agreed upon them, and then the judge came back and read their questions, and then they were answered. So it was really unique, and those questions they asked, I will tell you, some of them were more intelligent and fact-finding than the attorneys. They were really, really involved, and the attorneys, they're the ones that chose the jury. I've heard people say, "Oh, well, Judge, Gull, she arranged to have her people up there." No, that's not how it
No,
works.
no, no, no. That doesn't work like that.
All right, doesn't work like that. Both sides had to agree upon those jury members. Like they had certain members they could say, I don't want that jury member. I want this jury member. The prosecution had an expert come in to help them choose jury members, and so I think they did a good job in choosing them. They took it very seriously.
I'll tell you, and I believe they did a good job. I really
Yeah,
do. And I know
yeah.
that I could tell they put the time in. Like I
Hmm.
said, I could tell they put the time in. So, and it's great hearing it from you because you were up close and personal,
Yeah.
through the whole situation. So you're underlining it. Folks, if you really want to get educated on a case, especially on this case, Deb's True Crime Notebook. She's terrific.
Thank
I
you.
go there all the time for information. She talks about it, so you don't have to read it. That's kind of her slogan.
Yeah.
So it's real easy. Does it? Get a cup of coffee. Deb's True Crime Notebook. And just sit back and
Thank
drink
you.
the coffee. You know, very easy to handle. No hard work, and you just listen to Deb, and she'll give it all to you in a very precise and structured manner. And
Thank.
she doesn't miss a beat. Thank
I
you
think
so much for being on. We're going to have to go now. Um, and, let's stay in touch. It was our honor
absolutely.
to have you. It was wonderful. I'm sure
Thank
the
you.
audience will be very grateful for having you on.
All. Thank you.
Um, can't thank you enough. And, to our audience, again, our deepest condolences to the friends and families of Libby and Abby. And to our audience, please take care of yourself out there. We live in a dangerous world. You got to be on your toes. Make it a great day. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you.
again. We appreciate it.
Thank
Take care.
you. I appreciate that.
Bye now.